following presentation will provide you instructional support when completing your evidence of student progress, otherwise referred to as ESP, when graphing, and when collecting data for the application and your future classrooms. The evidence of student progress application is a representation of what your responsibilities as a special educator will entail in terms of data tracking, progress monitoring, and IEP updating. This application is extremely practical in helping to develop organization systems for tracking the progress of multiple learners' IEP goals. As we know, the IEP is a legal document, so tracking and monitoring that document also has legal ramifications. For example, if you are not keeping accurate data on your students aligned to their goals and monitoring on the schedule set forth in the IEP, you could be held legally responsible. This is why we practice those skills now. The data collected for this application will allow you to update the current goals you are monitoring for your learners, much like a special educator does yearly. When updating the goals, presenting the data in the report of progress, and tracking data, it is important to use language and terms that are both meaningful and understood by parents. In addition, your graph should help to illustrate this. When completing your ESP, practice as if it is your classroom and you will be having meetings with the families of your students. Better yet, try and use this data when meeting with the parents you're working with. For the purpose of the ESP, you will track weekly data for students you have selected. You should be analyzing this data for patterns and adjusting based on the analysis. Be sure to include your learner in the process when applicable. The ESP rubric can be found in your handbook. You should review this before you begin the application so you know what you are being assessed on. In addition, at your supervisor visits, be prepared to explain the progress you have made, share your data collection tools and data, and ask questions early. Use a peer support for reviewing your work and as a thought partner. Be sure you are taking the time to backwards plan from the due date to include 7 weeks of data for LBS candidates and all required components. Once again, make sure your data collection tools match what the goal is asking. During your first or second supervisor visit, you will discuss the learners that you are teaching, and it is appropriate for you to create a data collection system for monitoring all of the goals and objectives for 3 of your learners, or if you will choose 3 or more goals to monitor on all of your learners. Depending on your placement, there may be discussion with your supervisor about a comparable task, i.e., if you were in a high school placement with single content areas. At this time, you will discuss with your supervisor what your data collection procedures will be and the intervals in which you will be collecting data. Once you have identified the goals and objectives that you will be monitoring, you will be responsible for collecting raw data to evidence the progress towards those goals and objectives. Since IEP goals and standards should be driving your instruction, data collection should be able to take place with your teaching. Your raw data should be available at each supervisor visit to evidence your ongoing implementation. Then, analyze your data and make adjustments if your learner is plateauing or losing progress. Consider qualitative and quantitative data when making your adjustments, and engage your learner if possible as well. This may look like your learner taking some of the data for themselves or using a self-monitoring tool. You may also set goals with your learner about how they'd like to see their progress. These are examples of raw data collection tools candidates have created in the past. The goal is listed, the dates and the progress have been made is noted. In example 1 at the top left and 3 on the right, the words and letters that will be assessed are pre-generated, so it makes data collection easier in the moment. The raw data should be graphed for each learner and each goal or objective that is being monitored. The graph should be labeled with a title, the goal, the dates, and the targeted skill. Raw and graph data indicates that data was used to adjust the intervention in acceptable timeframes when necessary. Access the report of progress on annual goals. This is option 2 as the page shows in the middle here, either on the ISB website or on ReggieNet. It is also under your resources in student teaching. Specify the growth for each learner and include the method and schedule for data collection. Use the data that you have collected to support your academic and functional performance of your learners. Then the goals and/or objectives should be data-based. There should be a logical progression of the next skill. They should be SMART and aligned with the NILS. The examples shown display first the graph that has all the required components on the left. Then you will see graphing examples later in this presentation if you are unsure and additional help to support you creating graphs. Progress should be updated using the Progress of Annual Goals Option 2 page as shown in the middle and discussed previously. Lastly, when creating your new goals, be sure to complete all the requirements on the page from the PLAF to each benchmark as shown on the right. When completing the paperwork portion for each student, that is the IEP goal update and the progress of student achievement, the work done should be your original ideas. You should not copy anything that the CT already has on their current IEP. Modifications should be seen. Be sure to include the strengths, needs, impact of the general education curriculum, and the data in each PLAF statement. Your goals and report of progress should pass the new teacher test, meaning if your student should move to a new school or teacher, that person would be able to understand and utilize all of the information you provided. Your graph should include the title, which is the goal being measured, a goal line or the percentage or amount working towards, the dates that you assessed, the variable being measured, their performance and accuracy, and a legend or key. Examples of graphs are seen here. Please note all components described on the last slide can be seen. It is preferred that you use the dates instead of the weeks for the x-axis. Graphing help and examples can be found on ReggieNet under Student Teaching, Resources, Essential Applications, Evidence of Student Progress, and the sites listed here. The following components should be included for each student upon completion of your ESP. The raw data that you gathered, your graph data, the sample data collection tools, the ISB form for the report of progress on annual goals, which says option 2 at the top, and the ISB form that has the goals, objectives, and benchmarks. This slide shows an example of the report of progress, option 2, completed as a reference.